So next up we have Scott McDaniel for Solar World talking about the integration of solar PV systems into new existing buildings. A technology that's sort of growing in prominence. Big leaps and bounds have been made in terms of technological progress, and one that's growing in uptake in Ireland in spite of the complete absence of a feed-in tariff to support export into the grid. But Scott is the UK and Ireland country manager for Solar World, and he has responsibilities for brand development. Solar World manufactures and sells solar power solutions, and in doing so contributes to a cleaner energy supply worldwide. As the largest solar producer in the US and Europe, Solar World employs about 3,200 people and carries out production in Hillsborough, Oregon, and Freiburg and Arnstadt in Germany. From the raw material silicon to solar wafers, cells and panels, Solar World manages all stages of production, including its own research and development. So, over to Scott.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Is it still morning? No, it's not. Good afternoon. First off, before I get started, I'd like to thank Heat Merchants for the invitation to come speak to you today. I really appreciate the opportunity. From our company's standpoint, it may seem a bit strange to be in a market like Ireland, in the sense that there is no subsidy structure by your government to help you. But of course, as a company, we are very active in markets which do not have subsidy structures. So for us, we see this as an up-and-coming market, and we really appreciate the opportunity today to present a little bit about photovoltaics, something about our company, and really give you, and hopefully, a very good impression about what our activities are here in Ireland. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I guess I'll start with my title. It's a good way to start. My responsibility is Northern Europe, so I do look after a number of markets out there. Some of the markets have subsidy structures, some of the markets do not have subsidy structures. My main responsibility is the United Kingdom and Ireland. So this is why I'm here today, and our focus is really about brand development and an organic approach to making sure photovoltaics becomes an aspect or part of our infrastructure here in Ireland as well as the UK. I don't know what you know about photovoltaics, and of course I was only given 35 minutes, which I think was probably too little knowing me, because I can speak 35 minutes just on my name, but I'll try to move on as quick as possible. I want to take you through just some basic information of photovoltaics, and also try to give you some information that will help you, and end with a few case studies so you can understand what is the impact of photovoltaics on a business or on a consumer, because I think this would be very helpful for you. Really, the photovoltaic effect was discovered, or the photoelectrical effect was discovered by a French physicist, Louis Becquerel, and this was in 1839. Of course, we all know who Albert Einstein is, but he defined the photoelectrical effect, and most people don't know this, and this may be a quiz question for you, but this is where he received his Nobel Peace Prize, was for his work in this area. Modern history, in 1953, this is really when the first solar cell was produced, mass-produced, and this was by Bell Laboratories in the United States. Of course, it had an efficiency of 4%, which was not very efficient. It was more as a battery was what it was designed for. A sun battery was its original design. A lot of people won't know this, but a lot of people, when they look at photovoltaics, they go, is it rocket science? It was early. Obviously, photovoltaics in the late 50s was about rocket technology and what we were going to do there. It wasn't really until the late 80s and the Mir space station when photovoltaics became essential, because we were now leaving people in space and they needed to be able to generate electricity which was safe and usable. So this is really kind of the history. Our company, Solar World, is the oldest photovoltaic manufacturer worldwide. We were the first company to mass produce 1 megawatt of products, and so we have a very good history in this market. We don't make mobile phones, we don't produce televisions, and we don't do heating systems. Solar World is a pure photovoltaic business and has been for some time, and this is really our business. The basics, I really could probably end my presentation here on this slide, because this is really what is important. See, Really, if you look at photovoltaics, you're talking about the most abundant element in the world, which is sand. And this is very important. Solar World, we start from the beginning, which is the silicon stage. So we have a joint processing plant in Qatar, which is owned by Solar World and the Qatar Foundation. So we get our sand at source. It's probably the best explanation. The most important stage to talk about is wafer production. And by the way, there are currently in our industry over 500 companies that produce solar modules. What I need you to understand is of these 500 companies, these are mainly OEM products. Setting up a factory to produce modules is very inexpensive. It's a lamination process, it's very simple. And unfortunately, there's a lot of companies out there that only join our industry at this stage. They're buying the products, they produce a module, and they sell it to you. See, Solar World, we're involved in the process at the beginning. Our wafers are acid etched with unique serial numbers, and this is the most expensive part of the process. To create wafers, you need high temperatures and thin cutting precision machinery. It's very expensive. Just to give you an idea, our wafer production facility has an 8 megawatt free field across the street. This takes into effect 15% of our consumption. So it's a very high energy demanding process. The next stage is turning a wafer into a cell. Then it's stringing cells together into a module. And of course, what we want to talk to you about, it's not only about a module, it's the synergy between how a module is attached to a substructure and how the energy is converted into usable energy. So we'll talk to you about what is a kit in essence. And of course, what I think you'll be more interested in today is the future. Operating systems, battery storage, smart home management systems, controls. This is really the most important. So microgeneration is one thing, but also how you use that power is very important. So if I can, I'll start really at the first stage of production, which is the silicon. As you can read up there, I mean, it's an almost unlimited supply. So this is not an industry where we are using fossil fuels and creating damage. We're a very clean, green, energy efficient organization, and very important that that's where we start. Wafer production is very important. By the way, there are two methods of wafer production that I'd like to talk to you about. We're talking about polycrystalline and monocrystalline. Basically, there's two methods of producing this. One of which we'll talk about is polycrystalline, which is basically where you put all of the silicon into a crucible and you bake it at a very high temperature, 1400 degrees, right? And then after you get the crucible, you will saw that into loaves of bread. I'm going to go give you some basic information. It's a loaf of bread. And a loaf of bread is then sliced into a wafer, which would be a slice of bread. Of course, when we talk about monocrystalline production, this is actually grown in a cylinder. And this is the difference. And the main way you can tell the difference is if you look at the two wafers there, you'll notice one has 4 corners and the other has what is known as pseudo corners. The corners are cut off. And this is because it's grown in an ingot, in a cylinder, and we're trying to maximize the surface area. So there are two different methods of crystalline wafer production, which Solar World is involved in both of them. We have our polycrystalline production plant in Germany, and we have our monocrystalline production plant in the United States. And historically, the European market has always been a polycrystalline market. And the US has always been a monocrystalline market. You will hear misnomers, and people will tell you mono is more efficient than poly. Well, this is true. But whenever you're looking at a panel level, a 250 watt panel is a 250 watt panel, regardless if it's made of poly or monocrystalline. Some people say monocrystalline has better low light conditions. Yes, this is true. But ultimately we're talking about energy yield, not cellular efficiency. So there are a few misnomers in our industry. But this is the first stage of creating energy. The second stage is the cell stage. I get asked all the time, can you explain how you go from creating this wafer? Is very easy because it's just, baking and cutting. But when you come to cell technology, what is involved there? The best way I can tell you is it's screen printing. Okay, that's really what it is. It involves aluminum. I know, I can't say the word. I will try my best, but I can't do it. And silver. This is the process involved. Basically, what happens with a cell, and why it is blue, and both mono and poly cells are blue. Modules may look black, but the cells are blue because this is about light spectrum and absorbing the photons. So this is why we use blue. We can make cells in pink, in orange, and in yellow, in any color, but of course we're talking about maximizing energy, not creating aesthetics here. So this is the cell technology side of it. Basically, like I said, it's screen printing, and it uses a lot of chemicals and acids and etching and stuff to create the final product. And in our industry, I told you there are 500 companies that produce modules. There are only 24 companies worldwide that produce solar cells. So this is what's important to know. This is a small industry. A lot of companies can produce an end product and give you warranties and tell you whatever, but very few companies can produce the most crucial element, which is going to be the solar cell. And by the way, of these 24 companies that produce cells, there are only 8 companies worldwide that produce wafers. So SolarWorld is involved in the value chain from the beginning all the way through, and this is what separates us from a lot of our competitors in the market. It's like anything. If you make a good stew, it usually requires that you start with good ingredients, right? The better the ingredients at the beginning, the better the ingredients are at the end, and the same is true in the manufacturing of modules. So cell types, because there's a lot of cell types out there and people always ask different questions. I will break it into 2 different categories. So crystalline technology, which is on your left, which is monocrystalline cells, and of course polycrystalline cells, which is the production I've just described. And then we have thin film, calcium telluride, and lots of words that I'm not even going to try to pronounce here today. But there are different technologies out there. What's more important for you is, how do those technologies work on efficiency, and what sort of surface area will you need for these technologies? Because not all technologies are the same. And I think this is probably the best way for me to highlight to you what you're looking at with the basic technologies that we have. This is the efficiency, yeah, maybe not, the efficiencies of the modules. So 13 to 20%, 12 to 18%. By the way, this doesn't really matter too much probably for you. This is more from a manufacturing point of view. Efficiency, module efficiency, and cell efficiency equate to watt peak. So really you would not see this information anywhere else. But it's very important to see if we look at thin film. I'm not sure if you're aware that IKEA currently is selling a solar PV option. And what they decided to do is use a thin film option. But unfortunately it requires a great surface area to get the level of installed watt peak that a customer needs. So what we would say from our point of view, because we're only involved in this, in crystalline technology, is for surface area and efficiency, you would be better at this point looking at either polycrystalline, monocrystalline modules versus looking at thin film. Thin film, yes, works, but it does need more surface area. And I would say one of the things we never have enough of is surface area on roofs, unless we're talking about very big commercial applications. So just giving you an idea of the different type of technologies that are out there. So what is photovoltaics? Well, let's break it up into 2 words, a Greek translation. Photo is light, and volt, as you know, has something to do with, is electrical. How does it work? I'm trying to bring it into very layman terms for you and me. Very simply, what happens in the wafer production part, we use ultra-pure silicone and we add phosphorus into this production, which gives us the positive element of the cell. When the wafer is finished and produced, it's put into a chamber and it's gassed with boron gas. And boron gas gives us the negative element of a solar cell. So what happens is when you have one side negative and one side positive, which it is, and then the sunlight will then hit, I think I have this demonstration, sunlight will go through the cell, and basically what will happen, it's like having 2 magnets. If you put 2 magnets together, what do? They repel. And this is the same thing that happens in a solar cell. Positive and negatives help create an electrical field. The electric field is then passed through the fingers and the buzz bars into the string. So just to kind of give you a basic idea of what photovoltaic technology is about. By the way, We have been producing solar cells as a company. Our history goes back as far as 1958 in the former East German Republic. We were producing solar cells. So the technology is not new technology. The technology has been around. That's what makes it affordable and a viable option for people today. What photovoltaics is about is decentralizing energy. And that's what's very important. As a company, we're also involved in the off-grid side of our business. So we do a lot of off-grid solutions in Africa and Asia. We work with one of the companies here, Groundfrost, on a lot of their water pumping stations. SolarWorld does all of their solar PV for them. So solar PV has many applications for a consumer. But ultimately what you end up with is a module. And this is very important to know because a cell on its own is not very efficient. And of course there are technologies coming out today where people are doing solar tiles for new builds. These make really good sense. The problem is they're very inefficient. They need a lot of surface area. And of course the same question always comes to our mind, what happens if something goes wrong? Do you then need the roofer to come back and strip a roof to take away one solar tile that has malfunctioned? It's a very new industry, but it's something we compete in. What we see is solar modules is the route to go still today. And of course, what is a solar module? Basically, you take solar cells, and in most cases we're talking about 60 of them, which are stringed together to help create the voltage that is required for there. The most important thing to understand is they are weatherproof. They are built to last 30 years. But ladies and gentlemen, one thing I'd like to say is your investment is here. Again, there are only 24 companies that make solar cells. Solar cell is a small industry. The solar cells you get will all be of very good quality. The difference in your investment is the build quality around the solar cell. What's going to determine how well that cell performs and how long it performs for is the build quality. And what we're talking about here is the glass, the back sheet, the frame, the junction box, and these componentries that wrap that. And this is what's very important to know. Any company out there can offer you a quality module. As a matter of fact, I've never heard of a company say it's not quality, right? Everyone says it's good quality, regardless of what country it comes from or country of origin. With SolarWorld being a German manufacturer, we really focus on the build quality around the modules. We have modules in the test field from 35 years that are still performing today. And it really is very important to us this is the area which is most important because a module is where you can have a failure. And this could be for a number of reasons. There are a lot of companies that have recalls from time to time because they have chosen bad quality componentry. So this is an area where SolarWorld is an expert in the field, recognized expert in the field, and I would say it's very important when you're looking at photovoltaics is not just look for a panel, but make sure that it has a level of build quality because it has to be on the roof for 30 years. Very important. What it makes up a PV system, right? So I think you understand that the module is a commodity, right? And modules today, ladies and gentlemen, I remember if I look back at the history of our industry, we were producing modules in the 80s in Australia, which were 55 watts. And the manufacturing costs were $5 a watt. It was quite expensive. The technology has got less expensive today because there's a lot of players in the industry, but also the efficiencies of the panels has moved up. So today we're producing panels in 250 watts all the way up to 300 watts in a 60 cell format, which would be about 1.68 meters square. So I hear people from time to time will say, I'll wait till the modules get more powerful. You know, it doesn't move that quick, right? As long as I've been in the industry, we started out selling 210 watt panels, and today I'm selling 250 watt panels. So a lot of water has run under the bridge since then. It's most important in our minds is technology is not going to move on where if you wait a couple years, the panels will be 500 watts. This is not going to happen. It's slow and measured. Matter of fact, when you're making cells, by the way, you don't set out to make a cell to create a 250 watt panel. The best way I can give you an analogy, it's like feeding chickens, right? So you feed chickens all the same, and you notice some chickens produce small eggs, some produce big eggs. That's what happens in production of cell. You don't set out to get a certain efficiency. You produce to a level to get the efficiency you're looking for. But what makes up a PV system? I'm going to talk about grid connected systems, if you don't mind, because this is probably the most applicable in Western Europe, right? What we're talking about here is we have modules which are orientated towards the sun. Now please understand that a lot of people will tell you you have to have south facing. This is not true, right? You can generate electricity in a north facing roof as well, but obviously more diminished than you would direct south at 30 degrees. So there's a number of things that play into here, but basically the modules are attracted or towards the sun, which is where they're harvesting. You will have some form of mounting hardware onto a roof structure or onto a ground mount structure. In other words, there is a number of structures that we create to harvest the sun. Most cases when we're talking about the roof, we're most likely talking about a system which involves roof hooks to the rafters and aluminum, I know I can't say it, aluminum rails which the modules then attach to. Okay, so this is very basic information, but it just gives you an idea that it's an aluminum racking system is needed, and it goes to the substructure of the roof. And it's not drilled through a tile, ideally. The tiles are removed, the roof hook is put to the substructure, the tiles and the flashing are then put back to make sure it's watertight, because obviously this is the most important. We do have integrated solutions where you don't have to tile the roof fully just to go back and put a retrofit, where you can actually make photovoltaics part of the roof. In France about 5 years ago we had something called Energy Roof, which was taking laminates and making the laminates form the roof structure. So this is something that we have done for years. So there are multiple options here. Ultimately what you're looking at in a grid-tied solution is the energy which is coming into the house under DC would then go to an inverter. We would then invert that energy over to usable energy, AC. And of course you have a number of meters, so meter of the energy going out. Most important thing to understand in a PV system is the first thing a PV system do will feed the demand in the property. And probably like a lot of you in this room, both my wife and myself both work in the daytime, so we have a very small load in the daytime most times. What we've learned to do is change our habits. In other words, we turn the washing machine and the dishwasher on before we go to work versus before we go to bed. So when we're generating electricity, this is free. It's best to use that. And that's why battery storage is coming more and more important. So it's converted, the energy is used in the house, and then any surplus would be then sent back onto the grid, or in some cases, I would say, into a battery storage solution where you can use that energy in the evening. Battery storage is always a conversation. What I would say about battery storage, ladies and gentlemen, is very expensive. Currently, for a 5 or 10 kilowatt hour battery storage solution, we're not talking about a 1 kilowatt hour, right? Because this is not going to do anything. But a 5 kilowatt battery storage would set you back around 6,000 euros currently. What I would say is battery storage is plug-and-play technology. With the advent of electrical vehicles, we actually see battery storage becoming more prominent and more affordable in the next 2 to 3 years. Early indications tell me in 2 years, a 5 kilowatt battery storage unit would cost around 1,500 euros. So the prices are coming down, the more electrical vehicles which are being sold. So it is something to look at. What makes SolarWorld unique, and I know I'm not here just to talk about SolarWorld, but I think it's important to understand really everything about photovoltaics. See, SolarWorld helps with the pre-sales activity. In other words, we're talking about design. Because design is important to make sure that it is designed purposely for that building with those conditions. On flat roofs, you're going to be talking about ballast because most flat roofs in Ireland are non-penetratable. So in other words, you'll need some sort of ballast system to be used. And of course, it's very important to understand what ballast is there because we don't want things blowing off the roof in 30 years, right? So with SolarWorld, what we do is very well in the pre-sales activity, but we also work on the after-sales. We're a 37-year-old company, and our focus is a PV system. I mean, the best analogy is marriage. I know this analogy very well because I'm on my second one, right? You're not surprised, obviously, right? But Imagine two people, two components, working in harmony for 30 years. I would say we'd all agree this is very difficult. My parents have done it for 46. I don't know how. I think my father's death, right? But a PV system, that's true. A PV system is 50 components working harmoniously for 30 years. So after sales, customer service, and technical support is essential in operating a PV system. By the way, with PV panels, there is no maintenance, right? It's a zero maintenance product. As long as it has a good angle of inclination, we're going to be able to clean them by rain. And one thing I will say about Ireland, it sure does rain a lot here, right? So your panels will always be clean. That's not a good joke for you. You've heard that one. A lot of people say to me, they say, Scott, how long have you lived here in the United Kingdom? And I always say 3 summers. So that's 11 years. I'm not going for the jokes. I'm going to break out my Hillary Clinton joke in a minute. That's the best one I've got. We're talking about battery storage systems. We're talking about carport solutions. As a company, we believe we have everything for you as a consumer. Any application, we have a mounting structure that will work for that, except for thatched. Thatched is something we still have no mounting system. So if you have thatched, that's your get out of jail free card, right? But you can't have a barbecue either. We talk a lot about insurance, and there's a lot of companies out there that have things like insurance-backed warranties in case the manufacturer goes out of business. SolarWorld, it has a minority shareholder of the Qatar Foundation. Financially, we're very stable as a company. We've been around for 37 years. Recently, we just took over Bosch. So the Bosch solar assets now belong to us as a company, so we're in a very good position. But what's important for us is we also work on making sure as a consumer, we insure your system. Because as a consumer, I always ask the same thing. What happens if my system doesn't perform? Who compensates me for the loss? And what we do is set up an independent insurance which will help you. So I think this slide will give you a good indication of a company we're well placed to support the Irish market. But I want to talk to you about the future, because this is what excites me as a manufacturer, is not just talking about creating electricity to send to the grid to get a paycheck. It's really about consumption. It's really about making an impact in our market, in our communities, and it's decentralizing energy. Energy prices will rise. This is guaranteed, right? As long as I've lived in Europe, I've seen an 8% energy increase for the last 6 years. And it will continue. And for islands, we are affected more. Because unless we're talking about diesel infrastructure, coal infrastructure, which obviously we would be here, nuclear is not an option. Interesting story about the United Kingdom. They're not very smart people in England, I would say. Has a lot to do with they decided to build 2 nuclear power stations. But they asked the Chinese government to pay for them. So the Chinese government now owns part of the infrastructure in the United Kingdom. It really makes no sense to me. And of course, nuclear is not sustainable. Coal is the only product that is going to be around to 2100, but it is not sustainable. You know, there's enough sun hitting the state of West Virginia every day to power the world. I don't know if you know West Virginia, but it's not very big. Probably enough sun hits Ireland to power the world. So it is something which is viable, but let's not talk about just sending it to the grid. Let's talk about using it. So what we have developed, which is a product here, controls. First off, it looks at weather patterns and the weather reports, and it's a very smart system where it can then determine how to use that energy in the coming days. This is really quite amazing. We're also talking about, you know, I don't know if you go out and you're looking at new washing machines or dishwashers. Miele as a company actually has built-in interfaces into their appliances where they can work with renewable energies. In other words, you should be able to not have to remember to turn the dishwasher on, but your PV system automatically will see that you have peak generation and will send the energy to the washing machine and the dishwasher to turn it on whilst it is in peak generation. This is the future. Well, it's not the future, it's the present. We already have this technology there because it's not about generating electricity, It's about using the electricity efficiently, which is very important. Of course, with PV, you can work with things like heat pumps. They harmonize, they work together. There's a synergy between the two. Of course, you can get PV to work with your immersion tank. While you're generating electricity, you can actually heat the water in your immersion tank for free. So there is ways to synergize that free electricity into your home in a very effective, efficient manner. Of course, we're also talking about battery storage, which is the future. I'm currently looking at adding battery storage to my own property. This will probably take place in April this year because it's something that we've looked at as a consumer for a while, and we believe now's the time to take that energy, because I don't like paying the utility companies money, right? It's probably the Scottish in me. That's a joke, but you're playing them in football, so I was throwing that out there. It didn't work very well. Okay, so this is important, and of course that's what we're talking about. SolarWorld is not a commodity producer. We're not producing modules at a cheap price to go into a market. What we want to do is develop a brand in the market, and we want to develop harmony in the market where we can use the electricity in the right way. We also do a lot of off-grid stuff. When the Haitian earthquake happened, SolarWorld had donated 1 megawatt of off-grid systems to help the Haitian people. We do this throughout the world anyways. And as a company, that's what our ethos is about. This is probably more important to you. I've done my bit for the company, so they'll be very proud of me. Let's talk about what influences the output of a PV system, just for your own information. So what's important is the size of the PV system. The power or the efficiency of the system. Again, there are many different watt-peak options that we can choose. There are different modules we can choose. Of course, the most important would be the location, solar irradiation. A lot of people will say, why are you going to Ireland? There's no sun there. There's no sun in England as far as I can see. I've been there long enough to see that as well. But of course, we're not talking only about direct sunlight. We're talking about diffuse sunlight as well. So PV, actually, what we've seen on Ireland will signify why we're here. Orientation is very important. A PV system does not have to be south-facing. I mean, to be honest with you, if I was looking at a building, I think east-west is better than south. East-west mirrors consumption. So in the early morning sun, when you turn on the kettle or you put toast in, you're generating electricity, and of course you're generating electricity late into the afternoon. So there's a number of different orientations that work, and of course, temperature. Contrary to popular belief, filling the deserts with PV systems is not ideal, because we have very high temperatures. The higher the temperature, the less efficient the module performs at. So we have done a number of projects in the desert regions, of course, but it's not ideal. We don't want hot temperatures. And I hope this shows you really in Ireland, we have the right temperatures. Rain is a positive thing. It does make things grow, but it keeps your panels clean. So this will help you generate electricity. Just to go on that, talking about radiation, this is very important. There's a lot of misnomers. People go, it's obviously only on a direct sunny day. No, this is not true. So if you look at irradiation figures here, of course on a clear day, this could happen in the winter, I've noticed, and it can happen in the summer. And so can cloudy and not cloudy, right? Oh, that looks so good, but it's about the intensity of the weather conditions. What we find in Europe is the average is 50% is either direct or scattered. So the conditions are ideal in Europe, and hence why we've had an industry here for the last 20 years. So PV is not new to Europe, it has been around for a long time. To give you an idea of the PV market in Germany, the photovoltaic market in Germany is 50 times larger than the market in the United Kingdom and Ireland combined. It's a huge market. Of course, Fukushima was a terrible, terrible thing to happen, but it did change politicians' way of thinking. Germany got rid of all of their nuclear stations. They're in the process of changing that. Japan has done the same thing. Just to give you an idea, the Japanese market this year is valued at 8 gigawatts. It's one of the largest markets worldwide on the smallest islands worldwide. The UK currently is sitting at around just over 2.3 gigawatts, just to give you a comparison to that. Yeah. I've been told I have to move on. So let me tell you about irradiation. Irradiation figures, ladies and gentlemen. The average in Ireland is anywhere from 1,400, which is very good, to 1,000. So the irradiation figures in Ireland are why we're here. There is a photovoltaic market in Ireland because you have the irradiation to make PV viable. Of course, you can see where it's going to be the best is going to be the east side. We have some of the better irradiation figures. How do you turn DC into AC? It requires an inverter. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't spend too much time because I don't have too much time, but we're talking about either microinverters. Microinverters basically attach to the module, and they change the DC to AC at the roof. We also have string inverters, which are more affordable than microinverters. This would sit in the loft and would transform the electricity in the loft. And of course, if you're talking about commercial installs, we have larger units, because you could be talking about an inverter per module, an inverter for 2 kilowatts, or an inverter for 100 kilowatts. You don't want to be putting 10, 20 inverters on there. Information for you is when you're looking at a PV system, what elements are important. I just want to show you this one because I think from an architectural point of view, this is what you need to know. What is important is the shape of the building, the dimensions, the substructure. We need drawings of the roof which can help us. And these are the elements we need to know. Really just need to know what is the roof size. What is the orientation? What is the location of the building? Because that's when we can determine wind loads and snow loads for you. We also can determine output, how it's going to perform. But really, from your standpoint, it's basic information. What is the width? What is the length? Then we can determine how many panels could fit on there. But then, of course, it's an aesthetic conversation with you and your consumer of, does it make sense to fill the roof, or would it look better to do something different? I want to show you 2 quick case studies, and then I'll finish. I've gone for commercial ones because I think it's more important. There are enough commercial properties. This stadium, I don't know if you went into the restroom, my God, it's lit up like 4th of July. There's lots of light, ventilation going on, and someone is paying for this power. But PV, so this is a wood distributor in Germany. It's a 300 kilowatt system. Just to give you an idea, it was a flat roof. It's 1,200 square meters, 12,000 square meters, and it was installed in September 13. Most important figure is that the PV is covering 30% of the business's solar consumption. We're actually using 70% of the power inside. By the way, it's because they don't operate on the weekends. They close at 5 o'clock, so there is generation that they're not using because the business is not open. But invariably, we're talking about 30% of their electric bills are gone right off the bat by going green and investing in PV. This is a graph that shows you their consumption, and you can see how close the PV is in the summer months, or in the seasonal months, to their actual demand that they have. And it's very important that PV does stack up. This is a 2 megawatt system, a very large system. It's a pottery in Germany as well. Again, this was an angled roof. It was southwest in its orientation. It was installed in January. But again, you will see very similar information here, is that we're talking about 29% of the power of that building is used up by photovoltaics. 80%, 81% of the power is being used by the building. So that means 19% of the power is being exported into the national grid, but purely because it's not open on the weekend, it's not running full time. So PV can be used. It's a very viable technology. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you have loads of questions, and I know now's not the time for it. What I would say is we'll have time to speak to you here. We have a booth outside. We're more than happy to give you some more information. If you want to know anything about systems, modules, mountings, inverters, insurance, or any of those things, we'd be more than happy to speak to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.